Beyond the Wrench with Jay Goninen from WrenchWay.
Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On this week's episode, we had the pleasure of being joined by Mr. John Spence. John is an author and a speaker and just brilliant when it comes to business. This was a lot of fun. I actually had watched John do a speech at a conference that I was at a long time ago, right? We're talking 12, 15 years ago that I went and was able to see him in person, and have always admired him, and have always really respected what his background was and how much he helps and influences businesses. He's got a great book called Awesomely Simple. I highly recommend you check it out. But in this podcast, we were able to talk about a lot of different things, one of which is 6 things that you can do to retain and recruit employees, and really, I think breaks it down to a simplistic level to where everybody can understand it, right? So a lot of really good content throughout the podcast. This is a really good one. Make sure you've got a pen and paper handy because you'll want to take some notes based on what he says. And then go check out his book, check out his website. He's got a lot of great resources and a great newsletter. Just overall, just a really, really great guy that I had the pleasure of kind of getting to know throughout this podcast. Now, this podcast is brought to us by our friends at Sonic Tools. Sonic is a highly experienced specialist in the development and production of professional hand tools and toolboxes. With immense knowledge and expertise, Sonic has a growing reputation for its quality automotive repair tools and related products. Go check out Scott Saxton, what he's doing with Sonic. They do a really good job, have some innovative storage systems, and really good ways to keep everything organized. Their foam inserts are awesome. Their tools are high quality. They've got some excellent starter sets for those of you that are looking for ways to get people into the industry. Reach out to them, check them out. They do a fantastic job, and we're happy to have them as partners. Now, I'll let you get to this episode. As I mentioned, make sure you got a paper handy and a pen, because there's all kinds of great insights in this episode, and look forward to hearing what you have to say about this one after we're done. Take care. On today's episode, I am humbled and just extremely excited to have John Spence on the show. I actually saw John speak at a conference probably over a decade ago. I can't recall where, but was incredibly blown away by his presentation skills and how he connected with everybody, and just had always remembered it, and read his book Awesomely Simple, which I would highly recommend everybody out there read. And just I'm beyond excited for this episode. So how are you doing today, John?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Jay. I'm honored to be here. You're far too kind already.
Well, it is funny because you had some simple advice in that presentation that I had watched that had an impact on me for a long, long time. And I believe there was one part of your presentation where you talked about the percentage of college graduates that continued to read after they graduated, and it was like 0.5% or something like that.
Yeah, the average college graduate reads a half a book a year for what I call self-improvement, skills-based improvement, to get better as a leader, a salesperson, whatever it might be, or the equivalent thereof. I mean, it might be blogcasts or podcasts like this, blogs or whatever, but the equivalent of about a half a book a year. If you were to read, again, the equivalent of one book every other month, 6 a year, you're in the top 1% in the United States of America. And if you were to read 12 a year, you're in the top 1% in the world.
And what's crazy is, since that, over a decade ago, I've kind of done that, right? Like it really stuck with me. I had read, I'd read maybe a couple business books per year. And after that, it was something where I really took serious, and it's always stuck in the back of my head. So I give you a lot of credit for that, because that was something that impacted me probably for the rest of my life. So that pretty cool.
Well, it's interesting. Some of the smartest people ever in business or everything else write down, their best ideas, the best things they can teach you. And you can, well, actually now you get a bunch of it for free, but for $15, $20, you get their entire life that you can read in maybe 5 or 6 hours. Or again, a podcast or YouTube video. I mean, there's more information available for free right now than in the history of humankind.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. We're lucky to have that. So, talk to me about what you do. You're all over the place. You've got some great resources. Your email newsletter and just all the content that you put out is really helpful for anybody that's out there that looks for general business advice. John is a unbelievable follow. So, tell us a little bit about what you do.
Well, I ran a few companies when I was younger and spent a lot of time in industry. And then about 28 years ago, I was working for a large sales and strategy global company. I was the CEO. I decided to leave there and go independent. So I've spent almost 3 decades traveling all over the world, teaching leadership, just general business fundamentals, how to run a world-class company, leadership, high-performance teams, written a few books. As you can see behind me, I don't make the 12 book a year thing. I do about 100 to 120 business books a year, and I have every year since 1989. So really my expertise is in finding patterns. In all the companies I work with, all the books I read, all the other stuff, is I look for the key things, like the thread that runs through the entire topic, and then I try to make that really simple and understandable and actionable. That's pretty much sums up everything I do right there.
Well, and it's a lot. I mean, to take the time to read 100 to 120 books a year is incredible. I mean, and honestly, I think one of the things I noticed when I started reading consistently was how hard it can be to pick out books at times. How do you pick out what you're going to read next?
Well, two or three things. It's my job, so I spend a little bit more time at it than most people. But I'm very disciplined. I block an hour every morning at breakfast. I just came from spending an hour reading. I look for books that are recommended in the books I'm already reading. So if I'm reading a great business book and the author says, read this or read that. Also, when I meet someone, a CEO of a company, or just someone I'm connected to around the world that I really admire, one of the first things I ask them is, what are the top 3 books you would recommend for me? And that's helped me build a pretty good library. I'm also lucky at this stage of my career that a lot of authors send me drafts of their books to read so that I can give a blurb or write the foreword or whatever. So I've got it, I'm a freak. But that's one of the things that adds massive value to my clients when I'm coaching them or working with them is it doesn't make me any smarter. It just means I have access to more information.
And it's really helpful. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is building good teams, building good businesses in general. Yeah, I think building good teams is pretty foundational to building those good businesses. But what advice do you give? And this is a really broad question, but to just a general business owner that's out there. Obviously, our demographic is far more of those repair shops that are actually fixing things. But is there something that you see as a trend with businesses in general where you're like, okay, almost every business could benefit from this?
Yeah, well, I've done a fair amount of work in your industry, so I know it a little bit. There's a formula I came up with years ago. It's basically what I think are the 4 fundamental things that every business, I don't care what you do, every business must be superb at. And it's talent plus culture plus extreme customer focus multiplied by disciplined execution. If you're going to look at anything in your company, you've got to get the best people you can possibly get on your team. You've got to have a strong culture that keeps them engaged and motivated. It all has to be focused on delivering consistently superior customer service. And then all of that is useless if you don't execute on it day in and day out. So those are the 4 things that every business needs to focus on.
And that was written in my notebook a long time ago. Still have it to this day. I think it's incredibly important advice. But let's talk about building a team and really the impact that it has. To start with the impact side, we all know that you hire good people and it makes business significantly easier. But how do you go about that? How do you find these really, really good people? And how do you make sure that your culture is a fit or attractive enough to even draw those really good people?
Well, so I'll answer the second question first. A great culture is a major marketing arm for you. It's a clear differentiator. If I can go get a similar job someplace else, but the culture at one place is exciting, engaging, I feel like I'm working with people. Let's go back to the first question.
Sure.
I've done a bunch of research on this, and 30 years of climbing around in companies, and there's basically 6 things that top talent looks for. The first thing is fair pay, not the highest pay. Fair pay, and that is defined as 10% above or below what they would make to do the same job anyplace else. As long as you get parity on pay, these other 5 factors come in. The next one is challenging, meaningful work. When I come to work every day, I'm having fun, I enjoy what I'm doing, I'm learning, it's important to me, it's like a craft, it's exciting to do my work every day. Number 3 is cool colleagues. A players only want to play with other A players. You put an A player in with a bunch of C and D players, one of 2 things happens. They drop their performance to C or D, or they get frustrated and leave. So we talk about teams, people want to be on A teams. The next one is a winning culture, and I'm sure we'll go into more depth on that in a little while. And so I'll put that aside for a second. The next one is interesting. It's personal and professional development. Personal development. My company's investing in me. They're sending me to training. I'm getting more certifications. I've got a mentor. I've got a coach. I've got somebody helping me to get better and better every day. I'm better at the end of the month, smarter at the end of the month than I was at the beginning. Professional development says, do I see a place for myself in this company 5 to 7 years from today? Do I like it here? Is there a career path for me? Can I make a real career at this business? And then the last one, which is actually by far the most important, absolutely the most important, is I work for a leader I trust, respect, and admire. 88% of people or higher that quit their job do not quit the pay, they don't quit the work, they actually don't even quit their team, they quit their immediate boss. I can't work for this idiot anymore, I'm out of here.
Everything you just said is accurate, obviously spot on. But that part right there is one of the challenges we see in our industry. I actually had just put a LinkedIn poll out about a week ago asking service managers where they came from, right? Like what was your position prior to you becoming a service manager? And between the 2 answers that made up, over 80% of the vote were technicians, so the people actually working in the shop, or the service writers, the people that are selling the work. And so I think there's a huge gap in how much management training or soft skills types of training that those folks get before they get put in that chair. Is that something that you see?
Absolutely. And I see it across many industries it's called the Peter principle. I keep promoting someone to their level of incompetence. They're great at this job. They're an amazing technician, but you put them in charge of other people. They haven't had leadership training. They haven't had communication skills. They don't have some of the fundamental management business skills. And it's not their fault. They really know their job well, but then you put them in a job they don't know very well. And some fall into the groove and do a good job. The vast majority don't excel there. And one of 2 things happens. And in most organizations, people don't want to take a step, quote unquote, backward. I don't want to go from being a manager back on the technician line. That's embarrassing for me. So typically they either stay in that position and they're mediocre and get fired, or they quit and go someplace else where they can get a job that is more in tune back with the level that they're comfortable with. But the main thing is just because you're a great A performer out, as a service writer or a technician, does not have any bearing whatsoever on whether you're going to be a good leader and manager.
Is it the skills or the training that are, or maybe I should rephrase that, is it the personality of the person or the kind of what makes them up that allows them to maybe be a great technician but not being able to transition to a service manager? Or is it just the fact that we haven't done enough training to get them to that point? And I guess that's really hypothetical because that could probably vary by person.
Well, there's a couple of factors. Number one is some people don't really want to do that. They don't have a desire to lead other people. I'm really good at, I can look at some companies, look back at Apple, Steve Wozniak, when he was working, I think at HP, they wanted to make him in charge of all the engineers. He said, no way, I don't want to do that. I just want to do engineering. And he quit and started Apple. Worked out well for him in the end. But there are some people that have no desire to do that. But if you approach them and say, I want you to do it, and I'm going to offer you more money, and it's more prestigious and a better title, they'll say, let me give this a shot. And they get there and realize, I don't like this. Number two, and you said it clearly, some people just don't have the personality. They still live in the command and control, do whatever I tell you to do, shut up, get out of my way, sort of thing. And that doesn't work today. I don't think it ever worked, but especially today, you cannot lead like that successfully. And the last one, as you said, is they need training. The first time I went into a leadership position, I was not very good because and luckily I got a great mentor that worked with me every day and helped me and showed me the mistakes I was making. But without that one-on-one training from a really talented person, and they sent me to a lot of classes, there is no way I would have been successful as a leader.
Well, and I think dropping the ego when you get promoted is really hard, right? So you got promoted, your head's big because you feel like you've worked your way up the ladder, and then you start to get feedback on maybe some unfavorable things or things that maybe you're not doing so great. And if you can I feel like if you can just drop the ego a little bit and take what people are trying to tell you seriously, it can help you a lot. But we get so defensive on taking that feedback, and I think that really hurts a new manager.
Well, there's something that, and having run several companies and owned several, there's something I learned early in my career. I am not above people, I work for them. When I was real young and running a large company, I used to lay awake at night thinking, I have 100 and something kids to put through college. I don't have any kids, but I have all these families that depend on me to take care of their parents, to make sure the company's strong, to make sure that I can pay them all well, and they can pay their rent and their mortgage and everything. So leadership is not a title, it's a responsibility. When you flip it around and say, my job is to make sure these people thrive and that the business thrives so I can take care of them. I've got a good friend that owns a large IT company, and it's highly profitable, but he doesn't look at it as more money in his pocket. He looks at every year as, I get to hire 60 new people this year. I get to take care of 60 new families. And then the other thing is, it's the second most important thing I've ever learned in my life, is you have to learn to ask for help. Authenticity and vulnerability are critical. None of us are perfect. I mess up all the time, and it's hard to get that feedback, but the goal is to be a better leader, run a better company, make sure your employees are engaged and having fun so you can deliver awesome service and make more money. But that doesn't happen if you think you know how to do everything. And by the way, everybody knows you don't. They watch you make the mistakes. So you should be enthusiastic about getting feedback. It's hard, but the best way to say it is, that was really hard for me to hear, but thank you very, very much for telling me. I really appreciate it. You have to make it safe. This is a big, big thing on teams and in companies, idea called psychological safety. You have to make it safe for people to bring up problems and issues, or make a complaint, or bring up crazy ideas without fear of being made fun of or retribution or anything else like that. Because if they don't feel safe to talk and tell you what's going on, the problem is going to find you later, and it's going to be much, much bigger.
How do you know if you're not a great manager? How do you know if you're not a good boss? And I think in a lot of cases, it's probably fairly obvious if you're fighting with everybody and it's not.
That's a pretty good indicator, yeah.
But are there
if they're
ways
throwing wrenches at you and trying to stick your hand in the engine while it's running? This might be an indication they don't like you very much.
Yeah, I think there's some pretty obvious things. But is there some point where it's like the frog boiling in water, where the water starts to turn up, and maybe your management skills aren't to where they should be, but maybe that manager doesn't have the ability to look outward to see, hey, maybe I'm not as good at this as maybe I thought.
Yeah, I do this in a lot of businesses with managers. I say, let's figure out the red flags. What's the stuff that you see when someone else starts to mess up that's obvious on their team? So there starts to become infighting on the team. People stop talking to the manager. They're complaining inside. They stop bringing them problems. The human connection goes away. They just come, hand in paperwork, walk away. There's no genuine connection at all. The work product starts to suffer. Morale suffers. All quality goes down. All that stuff is an indicator. Not that you have bad people, but you have a bad leader.
Yes, and I've been in situations like that before, and it is extremely awkward.
Yes, it is.
So let's take it back to building a good team. Traits that you look for when hiring somebody. I mean, is it as simple? I think a lot of people leave it up to gut feel, but are there ways to really figure out those key players that are going to bring or add to your culture rather than maybe be a negative impact on your business?
Yeah, again, a tool I use is I tell managers, leaders to create an A, B, and C list. A is the stuff the person has to have. This is non-negotiable. They must have this training. They must have this experience. They must have this certification. Without it, they cannot be hired. That's the A list. B list is stuff that's nice to have, but it isn't, I can train them on this. I can send them to a class. I can give them some leadership training, whatever it might be, but I can give them up to speed in a B level thing. A C level thing is, it's really nice, but it doesn't really add that much value. They speak 7 languages. Great. We are mostly English and Spanish. If someone who's Portuguese comes in, then great, we can help them. But here's the thing is, once you create those lists and do it before you interview anybody, never ever violate the A list. I see people go, oh, they're so nice, or I like them, or they're cool, or we've got a friend, or I know their family, and it'll be okay. They hire them, and the person can't do the job. And it's not the person's fault. You've put them in a position where they cannot be successful. The other thing is, and 2 other things. One is to be able to explain your culture very clearly, and if you think this is a good candidate, go around and introduce them to a bunch of people. Let them meet people, and this is who you work with. I'm a big fan for making it actually sound harsher than it is in the job. This is what the job entails. This is what our culture's like. This is the workload, blah, blah, blah. And if that doesn't sound exciting to you and you're not then please don't take this job. When I used to run companies, I would tell people, we would love to have you here and we'll take good care of you. But if the job doesn't sound exciting, or you don't like the work, or you don't like the people around here, or our culture, don't take the job, because I'll fire you really fast. And it'll be a waste of time for both of us. I used to do that when I was hiring senior executives years ago. And when I laid that out and said, if you like it, please take the job. You might work here for years, but if you don't like it, do not take this job. I will fire you. 70%, 70% did not accept the job, which is painful. It meant a lot more work, but that was also 70% of people that I did not hire and waste a bunch of time, money, energy, and effort on, only for them to quit 60 or 90 days later. It feels bad, but it actually in the end saves a ton of time.
Yeah. And I think that's such a key point. And I want to talk about that a little bit. If you've, we talk about hiring, the uncomfortable thing to talk about oftentimes is the firing. It's not a fun thing to do. It sucks. I don't think anybody enjoys doing it. If you do, I think you've got some screws loose.
Yeah. If you do enjoy it, this is not you need to go get a therapist or something.
There's not many George Clooney's from Up in the Air out there that just fly around and fire people. But it is an uncomfortable thing, and I think before we get to the 4-page thing, because I really want to dive into depth with that, because that's one of my favorite things ever. But the identifying when somebody's not working. Like, I think there's a lot of managers that might kind of lie to themselves or tell themselves a different story so they don't have to fire somebody. How do you know when it's time to let somebody go?
Well, first of all, this is a phrase that I love and is really important. Came from Jack Welch, who used to run GE years ago. He said, I never fired anybody who was surprised. So the idea there is it shouldn't be you just walk up one day and go, you're terrible, you're out of here. there should be a conversation. And it's pretty easy. We can look at that A list of what they're supposed to do. If they're missing stuff on the A list, they're not delivering, they're behind on things, their work isn't quality, they don't get along with other people, they're difficult to deal with, they don't fit in the culture. Those are all red flags. But I have a phrase, kill the monster while it's small. The minute that stuff starts to happen, that's when conversations need to start happening. Because I think for all of us, you're watching it, you're thinking like, oh, this person's messing up, but you don't say anything to them. And so you get more angry and more upset and then finally, I have this, another, I keep using this, I think you'll love this one, called the ex-girlfriend syndrome. And I invented this one. This is when you decide you're going to break up with your girlfriend, all of a sudden everything she does makes you mad. You know, I hate the way her voice sounds, her smile's crooked. I don't like the way she dressed, because what you're doing is you're creating psychological distance. So when you break up, it doesn't hurt as bad. I see this happen in companies both ways, with employees and with managers. They decide, I hate this place, or I don't like this employee, and they start to make up excuses and tell stories and look for only the bad things, not the good things, because they're trying to make it mentally easier to terminate the person, or for the person makes it, I don't like it here, I'm out. Well, it's just because they've been focused only on the bad things and aren't looking for anything good. And that's a red flag. When you start to see ex-girlfriend syndrome start to pop up, that's something, and I've seen it across my entire career. It's pretty obvious when someone's trying to build a case to quit or build a case to fire somebody.
And I've seen that firsthand, and one from myself, including the ex-girlfriend thing. I think that's a perfect analogy. But
or then, ex-boyfriend.
Yeah, that's right. But then getting into some of those conversations where maybe you're having that performance conversation with an employee, and you can tell they're starting to nitpick at like every little thing. So like that, something that in our business, maybe somebody didn't put a tool back, and that's bothered somebody for the last 3 months, or it's insane. But like you'll sit down and talk with these folks, and they just they'll have this one big thing, and then, oh, by the way, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I don't like this, and when you let them kind of get it off their chest, it doesn't even. I think at times when they say it, they're like, that was kind of stupid.
Yeah, today's the day of phrases. I do a lot of executive coaching, and one of the things I tell people all the time is, did you say that to him? Did you tell her that? No. And how are they supposed to fix it if they don't know that something's wrong? And I coach people from startups to multi-billion-dollar companies, and I have to use that phrase over and over again. Have you said anything to them about that yet? And almost always it's no. So it starts with, maybe not the very second, but if it starts to look bad, it's go in and have a conversation before it becomes confrontational, before it becomes an argument, or before they've had a chance to nitpick a bunch. This is also why it's important to have psychological safety, so that if someone has an issue or challenge, how are things going? They go, well, actually, I'm pretty upset because Bob keeps leaving the tools out. And, you just don't do that, because there's people that probably have it lined up, wiped down exactly. They measure everything. That guy's going to hate Bob, who either leaves the tool out or puts it back crooked and slightly oily. This is the death knell. I can't stand that guy. Let's have that conversation before it gets there.
Technicians, are you looking for a new job? Even if you're just casually looking, you need to check out Reverse Job Posts. Reverse Job Posts flips the traditional job board around. Now, you can fill out a short questionnaire and let shops reach out to you with job opportunities. No resume needed. The best part is all of your contact information remains anonymous until you are ready to share it. It's a great way to explore new job opportunities, and it's completely free. Download the WrenchWay app in the App Store or on Google Play to try Reverse Job Posts for free. Links to download are in the show notes.
So as we get to the point to where maybe we do have to have the difficult conversation to let somebody go, in your book, Awesomely Simple, you have an exercise, I guess I don't even know how you had to explain that, but where you lay out 4 pages, and basically it allows a manager to kind of just set clear expectations and show what happens if those clear expectations aren't met. I thought it was one of the coolest things in terms of, because it's one of the hardest pieces of business, and the way that you have it laid out is really easy to understand and really, really effective. And so, do you want to walk us through the 4 pages here a little bit?
Yeah. It's funny. That's one of the things that people walk out of my webinars go, I love that, or my seminars, I love that. I'm like, it's something, again, I don't know when I invented it. It was years ago. But if someone in the company was struggling, and they've been told that, we'd had a couple conversations and things weren't getting better, and it was up between terminating them or trying to save them. And this is for somebody you really want to turn around. If somebody's got a horrible attitude, you've talked to them and talked to them, and it just isn't getting better, and you decide this isn't worth spending time on, you terminate them. Or as we like to say, make them available to industry. But if this is someone that you really think is good, they're just, something's going wrong, here's what I would do. I'd call them in my office and say, and this is before computers are, but I'd say, bring 4 pieces of paper. And I'd come in and I'd say, we're struggling here. We've talked to you. Things aren't getting that much better, but I really believe in you. I think you can be super successful here. It's just not happening right now. And we don't seem to be making any progress, or a lot of progress in that direction. So here's what I'd like you to do. On piece of paper number 1, I'd like you to write out what you will do specifically to show me and everybody else here you should stay on the team. I want you to write out very clearly the expectations we should have, what you'll deliver, how you'll interact with other people, all the things that we're struggling with now. I want you to write out specifically how you will fix them and what you plan to do. And then we go over that, negotiate it, and talk about it, make sure we're both clear, we both understand it, and then we both sign it. It's not a legally binding contract. It's an agreement between 2 professionals of, this is what you promised to do so that you can stay in the company. That's piece of paper number 1. Piece of paper number 2 is, what do you need from me as your manager or leader to make that happen? What hurdles do I have to overcome? What red tape do I have to tear apart? Is there a piece of equipment or technology or something that you don't have that you need to do your job well? So what's everything you need from me to allow you to achieve everything on piece of paper number 1? And again, we talk about it, negotiate it, and then we both sign it. Piece of paper number 3 is, if you deliver everything you promised on piece of paper number 1, in addition to keeping your job, which is pretty cool, what's a small reward you would like? Maybe dinner out with your family, or a gift card, or something, maybe an extra day off or whatever, but something small to say, hey, you did something really cool here. You did a 180. You were about to leave the organization, and now everybody is looking at you and saying, this person's performing. So, tell me what you want, then let's keep that performance level, and we'll just tear all this stuff up and pretend it never happened. Piece of paper number 4 is, if you do not deliver everything you promised on piece of paper number 1, and I gave you all the stuff you asked for on piece of paper number 2, what should the ramifications be? And almost everybody either says, I'll quit, or you should fire me. So you've got those 4 pieces of paper, they're signed, we've discussed them, we've negotiated them, very clear expectations, and then you just meet with them once or twice a week. Hey, how you doing on piece of paper number 1? Great job, you're looking good. Looks like we're headed for piece of paper number 3. Is there anything else you need from me on 2? But we're moving in the right direction, keep it up. Or you meet with them and you go, we've been doing this for 30 days, and you're not making any progress on this stuff. And also, I've given you everything you asked for. We've checked it all off, and you're just not making it. Do you think you can turn this around, or do we just need to move to piece of paper number 4 right now? Here's what I found. I haven't had to fire a lot of people in my career. I've had a lot of people self-terminate. The other thing is they can't go, I didn't understand. You're like, no, you wrote it. It wasn't fair. No, you wrote the goals. No, you wrote them out. We discussed them. We agreed to it. We both signed it. You didn't give me everything you promised. No, we checked off every time I gave you something. And actually, you asked for a few more things, and I gave you those too. I've done everything you asked for on piece of paper number 2. You have not delivered the things you promised on piece of paper number 1. We're going to go to piece of paper number 4.
I just think it's brilliant from the standpoint that it drives it just makes those difficult conversations a little bit easier, and it drives some level of conversation that I think doesn't happen in those scenarios in a lot of cases with businesses. I think you're right. You had said it before, where they just build themselves up to the point to where they're like, oh, you're fired, get out of here. And
Yeah.
it's like, there's no process to it, right? It's
And that's, I'm going to be mean, but that's especially prevalent in industries like yours.
Yeah.
Where people are like, I'm sick of you, you're out of here. And you know what it drives is a high level of personal accountability. I can't complain that, because what happens in most companies are like, we're about to, you better turn this around, Bob, and you better do X and Y, and you need to start doing Z, and you better start doing B, and if you don't, you're out of here. And the person's like, tell them. This way they're telling you, this is what I promised to do, plan to do, to prove that I should stay here. If they don't achieve it, it's pretty obvious, and they can't complain because they're the ones that wrote the goals.
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of the really interesting things to me right now is the current labor market. There's just, especially in our industry, there's just not enough people to fill all of the jobs that are out there. It puts a lot of our shops in really, like, it sucks, right? It's just not fun when you don't have enough people to take care of your customers. And one of the big worries is that you're going to lose your top performer because of how competitive the market is right now. How does somebody go about taking care of their maybe that top person? I see, from my standpoint, I feel like there's a lot of shops that might overdo it and almost make it awkward for that top performer. But I'm wondering if you've got any suggestions or tips on taking care of the best.
It's amazing you ask this question because every company I'm working with is having a hard time finding people. It's just in all industries.
Yeah.
But I just came across a new idea the other day, called a stay interview. So identify the critical players in your company. The ones that, I'm sorry, I'm going to cough to death here. Let me have another sip of my rum.
You're all right.
At 8:30 in the morning.
I got the same thing here.
Just kidding.
We'll edit that.
Identify the critical players that the proverbial, if they got hit by a bus, which there's a bus driving around somewhere whose only goal is to hit senior executives and key people. That's all that guy does all day long is, or run that gal over. But,
and they say the mafia's dead. No.
It says, death on wheels at the front, senior executives. But identify the people that are really critical, your key positions, and then go and interview those people and say, you're critical here. And we want you to stay. What makes you happy here? What is frustrating you? What can we do to show you that we truly value you? What would it help to keep you engaged in the organization? You know what the funny thing is? It's rarely money. They might ask for a little bit more money, but they're going to ask for more decision-making authority. They might ask for a little bit more flexibility. They might ask for a tiny bit more time off or something like that. But if you have that interview, you've identified what specifically, not just run out and give bonuses to everybody, which everybody likes, but what's really funny is if you, and I see this a lot, you give someone let's just say a $5,000 raise, it makes them really happy for about 3 months, and then they've moved all their expenses up to where now it's just like before. So that, the raise is, what have you done for me lately? Just like a manager says, what have you done for me lately? It's like, it's nice for 90 days. And then you just level set again and go, great, my salary is $5,000 higher than it was last year. So sit down and have a stay interview and ask them, what will it take to make sure you stay on the team, you're happy, you're engaged, you're helping grow the business and taking good care of your people, and have that conversation. Again, negotiate it. And make sure and it's going to be different for every person. So it's not going to be some blanket thing where you just walk out and give everybody, the same package. I want to know specifically what that individual wants.
Any thoughts on how often to do that?
For your really critical people, once a year, maybe twice a year. But this is something that it shouldn't change that much. But it's also the idea that, again, I keep coming back to this phrase, they have to feel safe to come and talk to you if things get off the rails. So that's part of that stay interview is, if something goes off the rails here and you're not happy, come and tell me. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Now, the other side of that is, if they ask for something outlandish, then you've got a cue here that this person is going to just keep pushing you and pushing you. I'd like a helicopter to fly me to work every day. I don't think so. I'd like a $50,000 raise. I don't think so. So it also gives you a bearing on, is this person committed to the company, or are they only out for themselves? Depending on what they ask for, you're going to get a real clear determination of, are you part of the team? Are you committed? Are you here to help all of us be better? Or are you only here to help yourself be more well paid or whatever it might be?
Right, right. I've got another, this is a really specific example, but I think it happens often in our industry, probably any business, but almost that leapfrogging leadership where maybe a technician is unhappy in the shop and they're unhappy with the manager and they end up going to the manager's boss, and it turns everything awkward, right? I had it happen to me multiple times where I had a manager under me and then a technician, and the technician would come directly to me to complain about the manager. And I've seen it over and over and over again in our business. And I'm curious if there's a good way to go about that, because it does put you in a really awkward position.
Yeah, we're talking a little bit about teamwork here, because I would consider the manager and the person part of the same team. There's an idea called a team charter. And that's when we sit down before there's conflict or anything else and sit down and say, here's some rules for how we behave as a team. You know, we show up to meetings on time, we do this, you don't jump over your manager and leader. You know, in small shops, they don't have an HR department, but you go talk to your manager and stuff. And if you can't fix it, but you've gone to them first, you can jump, but it's going to cause a lot of anguish. It's going to cause a lot of awkwardness, and it's going to cause a lot of resentment. So the idea is we have to create some rules on the team, agreements that we're just not going to do that unless it truly gets to the point where you're about to quit and you want to go talk to someone before you say, I can't stand this person, I'm about to go out the door.
How about from maybe that technician's shoes, where they are getting really frustrated? Maybe they've worked there for a long time, they love the company, they don't like their direct manager, and they are at that point where they're, you know, hey, I'm out the door if this doesn't work, and throw a Hail Mary to go talk to somebody. Are there situations where it is okay? I mean, is that something where a technician could kind of climb the ladder to voice their issue?
Well, you know what? I'm going to try to reverse one of my phrases. I'm going to have to come up with another one. I never fired anybody no one was surprised when I fired them. I never fired anybody who was surprised. I think from a manager thinks, I've never had anybody quit and be surprised. So there should have been, you know, some conversation happening. There should have been talking. But if all of a sudden somebody just gets up and walks out, you've created a problem here, because that means they don't feel comfortable talking to you. To go directly to your question, if they've talked to their manager, they've had those conversations, then they're about to leave. Yes, it is acceptable to go over, but then that senior leader is going to have to go down and put the three of them together and say, let's talk this through. I love to pick on Bob, whoever Bob is. Here's Bob's issues or challenges. You know, Sally, who's the service manager, we need to work this through. Can we work it out? Hopefully, if you've got a good culture, mature leaders who've had training and things like that, and they understand about how to handle conflict and feedback well, that should be a productive discussion, not a lot of yelling and screaming and throwing things. And if it isn't, then you haven't done a good enough job working with your managers, your leader, and technicians to create the right kind of culture.
Yeah.
You hope that no one has to jump over, but if they do, you've got a leadership management problem that's going to have to be addressed.
Yeah, and a lot of it does come down to communication in general. And I want to take that kind of and segue to leadership in general, and finding great leaders and trying, if we've got a lot of management and upper management type of people that listen to this, as well as technicians. So I'm trying to make sure that we paint this for everybody. But in this scenario, or not scenario, but like when you're looking at a leader, what is it that they need? What is it that drives a good business, from a leadership perspective?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I've just done a presentation to put one together on the future of leadership. So let me talk about the three things I believe. You always have to have the things: honesty, integrity, communication. Communication's a problem in every company on the face of the earth. If someone hires me to help and I can walk in and go, communication is a problem here, now let's get started on the other stuff. But so there's fundamentals that'll never change. Working well with people, all that stuff. But there's 3 quotients, if you will, I believe that you've got to have. The first one is IQ, but that's not the number, it's your competence. It's the reading, studying, going to seminars, getting training, but it's your ability to do your job better. So highly competent at your job, IQ. EQ is your emotional quotient. And that's your ability to have empathy, to have understanding, to make genuine connections with other people. Here's what we found out. I found out working with people, and there's a massive amount of research on this. EQ is actually more important than IQ. If you're competent, good at your job, but you cannot get along well with other people, make genuine connections, treat people with respect and dignity, it doesn't matter how good you are, you will not be an effective leader. In most of the stuff we've looked at, EQ is 5 times more important for a mid-level manager, and as you climb up the thing, it becomes 9 times more important. And I do a lot of workshops with large companies where I ask for the numbers back. The numbers are always overwhelming. EQ is way more important than IQ. You just have to have that minimum level of competence. The new one is AQ, and AQ is your adaptability quotient. And that's your ability to move quick, be nimble, be fast, handle the competition, handle changes in technology, all those things. In fast-moving industries where there's a lot of change, AQ is actually more important than EQ. If you're good at what you do, you can connect well with people, but you can't keep up with changes in the marketplace, those other 2 don't matter because you go out of business. But directly to your question, I think people listening to this need to realize that your ability to connect with other people, to have empathy, is dramatically more important than just being able to do your job well.
Yeah, and I've seen that, especially with that technician going into that manager role, where maybe that's where they fall short. Like they've got a lot of the IQ, although they still need to study on the soft skills and everything like that. I think there's a lot there, but the AQ is fascinating to me because how long has AQ been around? Because it wasn't until you introduced it to me something I had heard of.
It's only been around, as far as I know, for about 3 years. My wife, who's my business partner, actually came across it listening to a Harvard Business School podcast. She's a freak as well. But it's brand new. And the interesting thing about AQ is there's 2 sides to it. And it kind of goes back. The first part of AQ is insatiable curiosity. Constantly wanting to learn, grow, look at the marketplace, look at competition, constantly trying to get better at what you do, learning more. But the other side of it, which is critical, is the ability to unlearn things, to look at stuff that doesn't work anymore, leadership styles that don't work anymore, service things that don't work anymore, technologies, and be able to walk away from those and say, this was great, and we did it for 20 years like this, but it just doesn't work anymore. And we have to be courageous enough and disciplined enough to walk away from it and figure out what's going to work now, what's work going forward. It's that second part of AQ. Both are hard, but it's that second part that's really hard, especially in industries like the car industry or car repair and everything else.
Yeah,
it's been around, and we've always done it this way. I've worked with a lot of car dealers you don't understand, John. This is the car business. No, I understand. This is a business that happens to sell and repair cars. It's not the other way around. But it's hard if and people become very successful in some of those ways that are actually hurting them a lot. Their profits could be a lot higher. They could have a lot more engagement if they just learn to unlearn some of the things that aren't really working anymore.
It's such a killer when you hear that, like, well, this is this business and it's the way we've always done it. And I mean, it feels like you set yourself back 20 years whenever you hear that. Like you're like, no, you have to evolve. You don't think Apple's evolving every day? And they're wildly successful, right? Like it's the evolution. You've got to embrace that.
Well, you just graded because people go, well, we're not Apple, we're a car dealership, for God's sakes. Well, actually, Apple has set your standard now. Your customers are used to getting things in download speed, or Amazon's crushed everything.
Yes.
I want exactly what I want, the way I want it now, and I want it at the lowest price. Not the absolute lowest, but I want it at a reasonable price. Matter of fact, if you give me exactly what I want, and you give me now, and you treat me great, I'm happy to pay more money. Look at Apple. you pay a lot more money for an iPad or an iPhone than it's actually probably worth, on the market. And, comparison, I get a lot cheaper phones or a lot cheaper computers, but I'm willing to pay more because it's elegant, it runs well, they treat me well, the service is great. So it's those other things. You just have to understand that consumer expectations have changed dramatically just in the last 10 years, and in the last 5 years even more. And they don't care if you're a car business, they don't care if you're a bank or a restaurant or whatever. The same expectations of here's what happens. What is the best customer service experience I've had recently? Whatever it was, they compare you to that. If I went out to a nice dinner, if whatever it might be, that now becomes your standard. And they don't care if you've been doing it this way for 20 years. They care about, this is the way I want it. And that upsets a lot of businesses. I don't want to do technology. I don't have to have an app on a phone. Well, I work with a lot of credit unions now. Nobody walks in the credit union or the bank anymore.
No.
Everything's end-to-end. They call it end-to-end digital. If they're doing it right, they never see their customer, but they have extremely happy customers. Now, I know that doesn't happen in car business, although you can buy a car online and do all that stuff from a dealership or anybody else, but you have to meet the customer where they are.
Yeah, and I think the same thing applies to employees too, right? Where I mean, where they're seeing things that are out there, and you might not think, this is something we talk about a lot in our content, but you might not think like an Apple or an Amazon is a direct competitor to you in the car business for employees, but it very much is, because they put out there what their benefits are and what their pay is, and anybody that's ever worked with a tech company knows that they have some pretty cool benefits. I mean, they've got some stuff that would blow you away, and I think we really struggle as an industry to get around that. Like, it very much this is the way we've always done business. You're lucky to have health insurance and uniforms. Good luck. Like it is. It's crazy to me that we just don't adapt. You go back to the AQ side, where that's something where we've got to shift a little bit, I think.
Yeah, no, you have to. Your employees will demand it. Your customers demand it. You can push back for a while, but just realize every day you push back is costing you thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in employees quitting and lost customer. To give you an example, this is something I learned a lot from your business, is sales sells the first car, service sells the next 4, 5, 6, or 7. If you don't have top talent back there that's well taken care of, with a strong culture, with good leadership and good management, somebody out front who's a sharp salesperson can sell a really nice car, and then you lose that. Once they bring it in for service, you lose that customer forever. Not only that, they become what I call a customer terrorist. They tell everybody about how bad your dealership is or how bad your garage is. They complain to everyone, say, don't ever buy a car there or take your car there. And I'm sure everyone that's listening has heard about customers like that. For every one customer you hear like that, there's 15 others saying the same thing. You just didn't hear it.
Mm. And it's so easy to get the word out there right now. I mean, that's something that is super scary, just because if the wind's blowing the wrong way, it feels like some folks might want to put a Google review out there or something,
It's both ways.
Yeah.
They could also go on and say, this is the best experience I've ever had in my life. Where I work, there's a car dealership. I won't mention it because the other ones would get upset if they heard this, but there's one that everybody says, they treat you like family. That place is awesome. It's the only place I will ever buy a car from for the rest of my life. They've got and it's a small family-owned place that just crushes the competition, and everyone else complains, it isn't fair. It's easy. They have great customer service, and they do things right the first time. What a brilliant idea. What a genius secret they have.
Yeah.
They're really nice. Their people are really competent. They treat you like family. They fix problems. They make it easy. Sounds like a pretty good business model to me.
Yeah, sign me up. Yeah, exactly. And that starts from the top down. I mean, that really does, where if the owner isn't bought into that, or a dealer principal, if they're not bought into that, it's just not going to happen throughout the rest of the company. And, we've heard it from managers still to this day, where they still think employees are expendable. They still think that it's, all right, I'll just get another one. It's like they treat it like getting another soda out of the fridge.
Well,
crazy.
exactly. It's, I've got, today again is the day of phrases. I've got another favorite one. As goes the leadership team, so goes the entire company. Someone asked me my definition of leadership. It's when you're a living example of what you hope your people will one day become. Also, I worked at a boat company, which is similar to what you guys do. And I remember there was a guy on the line making boats, and he needed some more screws. And he went in and he got a cup full of screws. The manager came and said, "Did you get permission to get that cup of screws?" "No." "You're out of here. You don't do that without talking to me." And I went to the owner of the company and I said, "All right, let's talk about this." And I went through how much did it cost to hire him, interview process, that. And I said, "You know what he just did? That guy just took $110,000 out of your business. Imagine giving him a sack with $110,000 and sticking it in his trunk and him driving away. That's how much every time you just get rid of somebody." And this was just a small company. It's 110 grand in lost time, lost training, this, that, and the other. Then you got to go out and interview for something as stupid as I was trying to be more efficient in my job and not have to walk back and forth to get a screw every time I needed to fix something. And that is not a totally out of the realm of possibility example. I've seen things that, You took pens home. I mean, I've got one company I worked at. They count their pens. You went in the supply room and took 3 pens. You're only allowed to have 1. Like, for God's sakes, this is a multi-million-dollar company. You're going to fire someone because they needed 2 extra pens for their desk.
Tripping over dimes to get to pennies, right? It's crazy.
Well, on this one, tripping over $100 bills to get to pennies.
To me, that is, and it creates an abrasive culture. It creates a place where people don't trust each other and they're afraid to talk to each other. And I've worked in companies like that, and it's just not fun. I mean, when you get called out for taking an extra pen, like it's silly.
Yeah, well, you said the key word, trust. The foundation of leadership, the foundation of culture, the foundation of teamwork, all of that is trust. I have to feel like you treat me with respect, that I've got some autonomy, some level of self-determination, some level of self-accountability, and that you believe and trust me that I'm going to do a good job without you looking over my shoulder every 15 seconds and giving me crap about something that you never even bothered to ask. Like this guy never bothered to ask me why I did it because it was taking too much time to go back and ask for a screw every time. I just figured I'd save the company a bunch of time and money. That would have been a good answer. Why don't we do that for everybody then? Instead of, you don't work here anymore. Here's $110,000. Get out.
I don't get it. I think a lot of times it's when I think they're hiring the wrong people if they don't trust them, or they're not doing a good enough job in their hiring process. That, if you're hiring people you don't trust, I don't know if you're doing it right.
Well, I think in some companies there's just a lack of trust no matter who they hire.
Yeah.
You can hire somebody really, really great, but if you have a culture of mistrust, of backbiting, of politics, of favoritism, and especially in small companies, family and friends, that are working there get promoted. That creates a culture that it doesn't matter how talented the person is. We just don't trust people around here.
And those are not fun places to work for.
That's why people quit pretty quickly.
It is. Well, we're about up on our time. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience with? And we'll make sure that we get your I guess links into the show notes so that people can see all of the wonderful work that you do out there. But anything you want to leave the podcast audience with? Yeah.
One of my favorite phrases: the customer's experience will never exceed the employee's experience. Running a great company comes to hiring great people. Take great care of them. They will turn around and take great care of your customers, which will take care of your profits. It doesn't work the other way around.
No. And I still, to this day, use that phrase as well. So I can't speak highly enough of what you do, of your approach to business. And the book, Awesomely Simple, if you haven't read it, for those out there, one of my favorite business books of all time. Just an incredibly well-written book, easy to read, with some really, really good stuff in it. So we can't thank you enough for joining us on the show, John. It's been a really, really great pleasure for me to be able to meet you on a one-on-one basis here and pick your brain for an hour. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Jay. It's my honor. I'm happy to help. We're all on the same team.
That's right. Well, we'll get you back at some point down the line, but yes, again, thank you so much. And to everybody out there listening, make sure you go check out John's website, the book, anything that he puts out there, your email newsletter. I think you have a weekly email newsletter. Is it weekly?
Bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly.
Yep.
Yes. It's very good. So
yeah, and I put a lot of stuff up on LinkedIn, so connect with there, and it's just johnspence.com. Very innovative.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, John, and have a great day.
You too, Jay. Thanks, man.